And I don't know how fake feel, nigga. Cause all my life I've been a real nigga. Say all my life I've been a real nigga. Yeah, all my life.
Hello, all. I was sick for a week or some change. I feel a lot better now, but my voice was just so messed up and I could not record, after most of the symptoms were cleared up. And I didn't want to get on here sounding crazy. Now my voice is back. Now I'm ready to upload. Your boy is back. I appreciate the patience and I appreciate everybody heard my EP. Y'all the GOAT. But anyway, this video is about me, while I was recovering, I decided to pick up the original Resident Evil on PlayStation 5. I was reluctant to bother with it since I have felt since the 2000s that the Resident Evil remake blew it completely out of the water in basically every category. So, my original disc got scratched during my many moves I had to endure during my teenage years, I didn't bother to replace it. But eventually I ended up buying the Nintendo DS version of the game, Deadly Silence, and completed it a few times. For a minor backstory of how I got into the series, I originally played Resident Evil 2 on a classmate's PlayStation 1 back in the 4th grade. I do not remember ever completing a scenario at his house as we battled Pokemon most of the time, but I do remember running around as Leon for a bit. I ended up getting a Nintendo 64 version, and within a few months later, I got Resident Evil 3. About 2 years later, I got a PlayStation 2 with Code Veronica being one of the first games I got for the system. Nearly a year later, I would end up with Resident Evil Remake, and right after that, Resident Evil 0 for my Gamecube. Resident Evil Remake blew me away, and it's still my second favorite game in the series and has been for over 20 years at this point. Do you see the issue? I technically got into the original Resident Evil right before Resident Evil 4 came out on the Gamecube, and I remember not being as impressed with it like the Resident Evil Remake, and opted out of playing it. I just couldn't get over feeling like I was running through a worse looking version of the beautiful mansion I grew accustomed to on Gamecube, and how the gameplay felt pretty clunky, causing me to die to hunters all the time. I enjoyed the voice acting as well as the live action cutscenes, but I took it as more of a joke than anything else.
Chris Redfield. Jill Valentine. Mary Burton. Rebecca Chambers. Alan Wesker. Resident Evil.
Oh, Barry!
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right. Barry, thanks for saving my life.
Whoa! What is it?
What? Oh! Oh no! It's me, Chris.
Is that you, Rebecca?
Don't attack me, please. I was like 14 and judging it off of shallow merits. And looking back, I can honestly say I judged it a bit unfairly out the gate, since after beating Jill and Chris a couple times, I never went back to the game again. Let me say that I never thought it was a bad game at all. That's not what I'm saying, for real. My thing was, since I had Resident Evil Remake that was better in every way in my eyes, I didn't see the point in playing the original at all. So I didn't. And then my disc got scratched soon after I got it. I did not have access to it until about a decade later when I bought Deadly Silence for the Nintendo DS. I played it from time to time, but as soon as I got my Switch, it is just very difficult to go back to the tinier screen, especially since I do not have the XL Nintendo 3DS. There were many attempts, but unless it's a Pokemon game, I just cannot play games on that small of a screen anymore. Now that I can play the game on a bigger screen with better sound, I have grown a new appreciation for the game. See, the main thing I noticed was how there is more sinister music playing throughout the mansion as opposed to the Resident Evil Remake's more creepy music. It gives the mansion a very different feel, since you really feel like the mansion has a lot of booby traps and enemies that are there specifically to kill you. The Resident Evil remake had a very creepy vibe where you knew there were booby traps and enemies, but they were designed to scare you or throw you off as opposed to outright kill you. What I'm saying is the original and Resident Evil remake had distinct vibes from each other that can be appreciated on both sides. Also, I have to say this, but instead of saying Resident Evil remake, I'm just gonna say remake for the remake of Resident Evil. And when I say original, I just mean the original game, because it's getting to be a lot to say Resident Evil remake all the time. So yeah, follow me. Speaking on the mansion itself, the game is definitely shorter than the remake since there is no Lisa Trevor, so there is no abandoned house in the courtyard area, no underground below the caves, and a familiar yet somehow a little different layout of the mansion. This is because while the layout is mostly the same, with the remake adding a tiny bit of extra content for both characters, some of the items are used in different ways when it comes to progressing the game. For example, the blue jewel that you get from pushing a statue off the second floor into the dining room has a different use in both versions. In the original, this is needed to get one of the crests you need to get out of the mansion to the guardhouse. In the remake, this item can be entirely skipped since it doesn't give you a key item or anything, it just gives you ammo. Sometimes you may run into a familiar door and say the armor key unlocks the door in the original, but in the remake it's a sword key. Also, the game is hard. Now, I don't think any of the Resident Evils are that hard once you understand them, have a decent route, and know what weapons to use and when. Resident Evil 0 and Code Veronica were always the most difficult face camera angle games for me, followed by Resident Evil 3, which is somewhere in the middle. Not too difficult, not too hard, but there are some hard parts. And then Resident Evil 2, which is laughably the easiest game in the series, like face camera angle, over the shoulder, Unreal Engine. This game is the easiest. Calm down. I know that game is love. I love it too. It's a great game. It's in my top 5 Resident Evil games. I don't remember the original experience with the OG Resident Evil 1 enough to know if I thought it was hard, but I do know that I beat the game with both characters on a Saturday if that counts. All I remember is hating hunters, and yeah, we will get to them later. We will get to these bastards later. Man, this game kicked my ass on my first attempt back to the mansion. Jan killed me. Well, he ate me. Yikes. Dang. And then later on, I overestimated my health and died to some dogs. I also got killed by a hunter, which is to be expected since hunters are the main enemies that kill me nowadays, especially in those fixed camera angle games. I don't understand it. Sometimes, like if I die, it's to a hunter. I don't know why. Anyway, I was in caution unbeknownst to me apparently, and he did his lunge attack and decapitated me. This is the thing also, when you're in yellow caution in other games, I mean, you pretty much run normally and can survive most things still. When you're in orange caution, your character holds his stomach or holds her stomach and is kind of limping around but still running the best of their ability. When you're in danger, you start limping. I say that to say this, in the original Resident Evil, your character doesn't change whether you're fine or in danger. They're still going to run around like nothing's wrong. So, yeah, it's very easy to get killed in this game, unfortunately. But yeah, I figured out the bazooka may as well have had infinite ammo with a huge stockpile of shotgun ammo near the end of the game. The game flowed pretty well too, and it feels like a super tight experience similar to the original Resident Evil 2, but keeping the difficulty intact. Everything felt more difficult from the movement that feels a bit floaty to me compared to other versions, down to the auto aim working when it wants to. And on top of all that, the enemies like hunters and chimeras that do major damage gets you in caution and can easily one-shot you randomly. 2 hunters is pretty much a death sentence in this game if they get close to you, since they stun like you and potentially one of them can randomly one-shot you. Sometimes it works out and you can blast them away or run past them, but there will always be a huge chance you will get stun locked and die. The hunters are still difficult in Remake, but they are a lot easier to deal with and manage through the auto aim working a lot better as they hop around, being able to hit them out of the air more consistently due to improved hit detection, and the inclusion of defensive items that knocks them away or stuns them depending on the item. Chimeras are easier as well, but not exactly a piece of cake either. Both of these enemies still do a lot of damage in comparison to other basic enemies in the game and will kill you if you aren't careful enough and take it easy on them. Jan was also difficult, but to be fair, I just don't know how to fight him without getting damaged. I am still getting poisoned most of the time with getting the crest past the shield key door. I still need a couple of health items against him in the room with the piano, as I've given up trying to evade him due to him hitting me anyway, so I just fire my strongest weapons at him as fast as I can. In comparison to Jan in the remake, I can usually skate by without getting poisoned and get the death mask, and when I fight him later for the wolf medallion in the library, I can usually no damage him quite easily due to the bookshelf. But there's nothing in there for you to run around in the animation where he lunges forward. It's hard for me to evade. Zombies are thankfully pretty easy, and a lot of them you can run past them without wasting ammo. Dogs are easy as well, but I still hate dogs. I hate dogs in every game, honestly. Dogs in real life are cool, so don't come at me. Black Tiger and the spiders themselves are definitely harder than the counterparts in the remake, in my opinion. I have had a similar feeling with Black Tiger as I do Jan, which is I do not know how to no damage it yet. So it just feels like a boss fight designed to make me use health items. Spiders are harder for me to fight as well, since they seem to be pretty quick in comparison to your character. So they are likely to damage and poison you, but not kill you. The Tyrant was always easy to me. It's the same case here. In both fights in the lab and on the helipad, I have never struggled on any fight ever in life involving a Tyrant, and that's because I always save some magnum ammo with Chris and some acid shells as Jill. He goes down easily to a few shots with both weapons, so the fight is over in like a minute, give or take. Chris and Jill also have elements in their game that makes it different enough to beat the game with both characters. In the original and remake, Barry helps Jill out a lot. It actually gives her ammo at different points in the story. Chris has Rebecca, who, while she doesn't give Chris ammo, she does heal him in the story at a certain point. The main difference between versions I noticed with Jill is that in the original, when she gets poisoned by Yon, Jill will pass out and Barry will save her. In the remake, Jill is still poisoned, but she has to get the serum herself, as Barry is nowhere to be found. The main difference with Chris is that in the original Plant 42 fight, the plant grabs Chris the second he enters the room, and then you play as Rebecca, who has to make the V-Jaw chemical to kill Plant 42. In the remake, Chris is able to fight Plant 42 with the V-Jaw being optional. For both characters, the main difference between the original and remake is the process of getting to the courtyard and the items used to get there. In the original, you need 4 crests to get to the courtyard and later on to the guardhouse. There are also no death masks, but the crests you get to gain access to the courthouse are in similar places as the death mask. In the remake, you have to obtain the 4 death masks to use in the grave in the graveyard, or using all 4 1 chain the coffin hanging up on the other side of the room. When you approach the coffin, a crimson head will arise from it, and you will need to kill it to progress. After you inspect the coffin and grab the stone and metal object, you can now leave the mansion and head to the guardhouse. However, instead of the crank being in the shed, you will need to venture out past another graveyard to an abandoned house to get the crank. After meeting Lisa Trevor and then obviously fleeing from her, you can now use the crank in the courtyard to lower the water so you can finally reach the guardhouse. As you can see, they added a bit, but it doesn't feel like wasted content, but instead some bonus areas even on repeat playthroughs. Oh, I cannot believe I didn't mention the most obvious difference that the original and remake has between them, and that would be the Crimson Heads. After you kill a zombie, there is a hidden timer that decreases depending on the difficulty you are playing on. When that timer runs out, the zombie will reanimate and become a Crimson Head. They are faster and do a bit more damage than regular zombies, but they are easily dispatched if you see them coming or you know what you are doing. The lighter, as well as the oil you find throughout the game, is used to burn the corpses to cease the reanimation. And if you do not want to do all that, a simple decapitation will do the trick also. Sometimes you can kill a zombie, never burn it, and never encounter it as a Crimson Head if you killed it in a room that you would never return to. Or you are just so quick in progressing the mansion that they don't have time to reanimate. Jill has flame rounds that kills the zombies as well as burns them, which is what I tend to use the flame rounds for when I play as her. Chris is rightfully considered the more difficult campaign in both the original and the remake, since he doesn't get the bazooka or the grenade launcher depending on what version you're playing, has to deal with small keys to unlock certain doors, has 6 item slots while Jill has 8, and he gets little help in comparison to Jill, who gets Barry's help throughout her game. A perfect example is how Jill can easily get the shotgun in both the original and remake, since Barry will save her. Chris, on the other hand, has to get the broken shotgun behind a small key door and then backtrack to the other side of the mansion for it. I find both characters fun to play as, but since Jill is my favorite character in gaming on some days, I go back and forth with her and Vega from Street Fighter, just so you know. I tend to play her campaign more, so I might be a little biased. There are other minor differences you will notice between each version in comparison, but they aren't really worth noting. I started going to depth about the campaign and how well the mansion flows together. Some of my favorite moments, areas, favorite cutscenes, a story analysis, and basically everything else I can describe to somewhat tell my complete thoughts about the games. But this video isn't about that. This video is just a guy who has loved the series for nearly 20 years at this point, but never cared for the original the way I always felt I should have. Once again, I never thought the original game was trash, but I thought since the remake existed, there was no need to play the original game besides nostalgia, which I did not have. I was very wrong. The games clearly have different feels to them through atmosphere and ambiance, the amateurish delivery of dialogue, how some of the puzzles are similar yet very different, the original being a shorter, more compact experience, and the original actually being a bit more difficult than I personally remembered. It's a great game with a decent art style, and I'm glad I went back and gave the game an unbiased chance on my television. So, that's pretty much it. I recommend every fan of the series to give it a try with an open mind because even though it is obviously dated, beneath all the dust, it's an undeniable gem that should be loved, cherished, and above all else, respected. What do you all think of the original Resident Evil? Did you play it on release, or did you play it much later like I did? Where would you rank the original game amongst the rest of the series? Do you enjoy the remake more or less than the original game? Who is your go-to between Jill and Chris? Do you like Rebecca more than Barry, or vice versa? By the way, I usually pick Jill since she's always been my favorite character in the series. But as I stated above, I am obviously a bit biased. Oh, almost forgot. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. My analytics says that over 90% of people that watch my content are subscribed. Also, don't forget to hit that like, comment your thoughts down below, and share the video everywhere you see fit. I'm feeling a bit better. Thanks for the well wishes, and much love everybody. Face signing out.